Good morning, everybody. It is a pleasure to have you here. I'm Natalie Klauter from Unimed, and I want to thank you also on behalf of the InterregMed program. Before giving the floor to the speakers and to the moderator, I would like to introduce a short video that was produced to present the achievements of the InterregMed program.
We urgently need a change. We need to implement effective measures to adapt and mitigate to the multiple effects of climate change. Easier said than done. At the InterregMed program, we strive to create the best climate for a change.
We combine commitment, ideas, and resources to devise solutions for mitigating and adapting to climate change in the Mediterranean. To do this, we work with cities, regions, and national governments, universities and research centers, citizens associations, interest groups and NGOs, small and medium enterprises. We strive to have all the stakeholders on board, to develop community-based solutions in a wider transnational cooperation framework, while keeping a mission-driven approach. Our main goals are to foster an innovative and sustainable economy, to protect and restore our natural heritage, to promote greener living areas, and enhance sustainable tourism in the region. In other words, to make the Mediterranean green transition happen.
The Mediterranean region warms 20% faster than the rest of the world. This means that the impact of climate change will be more severe in the Mediterranean than anywhere else in the world. And local authorities will be at the forefront as they play a pivotal role in adaptation and mitigation. In this context, I believe that the InterregEuromed program mission is crucial and that we have to create the best climate for a change. I mean, we have to create the conditions for local and regional authorities to work with other stakeholders at transnational level to develop solutions for their local needs that can be transferred, replicated, and scaled up. We wanted to bring the climate emergency of the Mediterranean region in the spotlight. So we decided to create the Med Pavilion at the COP27. For this, we joined forces with key stakeholders and organizations to show the challenges we all face and how we complement each other. For the InterregEuromed program, it will be the occasion to showcase what we have already achieved to mitigate and adapt to climate change and how we will build on those results to make the Mediterranean green transition happen in the future.
From 2014 to 2022, we have founded 142 transnational cooperation projects in 13 countries and 57 regions, involving 837 beneficiary organizations. While in the new programming period, we plan to invest 294 million euros in 14 countries and 69 regions with one common goal: to make the Mediterranean green transition happen.
Okay, so I would like to give the floor to Dani Abdul Malak for the moderation.
Good morning.
Hello, hello. We can hear you.
You hear me well, I hope?
Yes.
Very well, thank you so much. So, yes, I'll start then. So thank you a lot for this introduction and for the host and organizers, including the Interreg Med program and the Euromed programs, Union for the Mediterranean, UNIMED, that have been coordinating all this work here. So this session today is focusing mainly on a broad range of work that has been going on in the context of several regional projects in the last years, and it's focusing mainly on the Mediterranean biodiversity challenges linked to marine litter. Certainly, we are in the context of a very timely COP linked to climate change, and we know that these important sources of pollution, including marine litter, are an important factor that triggers more or increases more the effects of climate change. And that's what we really want to take out of this session. This session will be around 55 minutes. And we really would like to focus on the issue of marine litter, as I mentioned, what solutions these broad projects and initiatives have been working into the last years, the tools available to tackle this issue, the transferability of these tools, the uptake and the transboundary cooperation really needed to solve this issue that we are all somehow linked to. From my side, as an introduction, I wanted just to highlight very briefly a common policy report that we developed in the context of a big community of projects linked to the Interreg Mediterranean program, and that came out with these 9 recommendations that you can see in the slide in order to ensure that we reach a zero pollution path in the next years to come. And very briefly, the 9 recommendations are mainly broadly designed around the production and consumption, the whole somehow cycle that is linked to marine litter. So there is a great need to tackle effectively the unsustainable production and consumption to prevent the litter generation, so to close somehow the source as far as we can, but also certainly in all the work that needs to be done, we need to ensure that there is a real involvement and engagement of the local community and stakeholders and the civil society in all of this in order to be effective on the ground. Certainly, cross-border cooperation is a key term here, especially the EU, non-EU sides of the Mediterranean. They need to be working together on tangible solutions because this issue is totally transboundary. If we don't cooperate, there is no way that we can tackle this somehow horizontal pressure that we are all linked to in the Mediterranean. Certainly also it comes from many sectors. This issue is somehow an outcome of many sectoral activities, and this cross-sectoral coordination across the whole way of dealing with this challenge is key. Certainly, we need to tackle all the sources, the land-based, but also the sea-based sources of marine litter are important to be identified and to have mechanisms to tackle them. Certainly, we need to ensure a harmonization of the knowledge we know about that and to communicate that and to update this information at a Mediterranean-wide level. And that's key in order to ensure an evidence-based approach to the issue. Certainly, we need to ensure that we have the right knowledge and also the right tools and to transfer them to local managers that are dealing with this issue on the ground. And the issue is very diverse, so there are plenty of tools that we will be hearing about that could be tackling one or another situation, and they need to be somehow at hand of local managers. Certainly, we need to ensure a certain sustainability of the achievements across the way. So as we go, this needs to be something to consider. And certainly, as we are getting more and more knowledge and information and solutions and results, we need to be adding them in an adaptive way to ensure that the protocols of improving the assessments and the monitoring issues are updated. So those are broadly the main recommendations that came out of this common policy report, because that has been really a very an effort across many of the speakers that are today and many of the actors that are in the room. So certainly you can know more about that, and I think that has been shared in a link to this policy report where you can get more information. So with this introduction, and also certainly after thanking the hosts, but also the panelists that we have here and the participants to this interesting session, the approach of this session will be divided a bit in three overarching angles, where we would like to go with two speakers to get us a bit of an update on what is the status of science linked to this topic. Then we want to move into two speakers or two panelists around the policy side of the issues and how there are solutions that are in hand to consider. And we would like to go with two panelists as well to understand more what are the practices that are in hand and how they are tackled at local level. So the idea is to have a 5-minute exchange with each panelist. So to ask two questions. So we have had these preparatory meetings, and we would like to be as targeted as possible because the session is quite short. And we would really like to tackle really what are the results, what are the solutions at hand, and to ensure that everybody has the time to give a highlight of their knowledge and developments. And then we will be closing with our dear friend Alessandra from Union for the Mediterranean, and I guess we will have a short video as well at the end. So let me then start directly with the first panelists. So we have our dear friend Cristina Fossi from the University of Siena. Good morning, Cristina. Cristina is a full professor.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. So Cristina is a full professor of ecology and ecotoxicology at the University of Siena. And since the year 2000, she is the scientific director of the biomarker laboratory in the university. So Cristina, with you, we have gone into preparing like two questions that we think are relevant. And I'll be mentioning the first one. I'll give you 2 minutes, and after that, the second one. So you have been engaged in quite many projects linked to Interreg-Med and the CBC Mediterranean programs, projects dealing with the issue of marine litter. Well, understanding the pressures that marine litter has on marine fauna, and in diagnosing mainly approaches to understand their impacts on marine species health in the Mediterranean region. So could you please tell us in a nutshell, what do we know now about these interactions, and at what scale of impacts of marine litter and this marine litter has on the overall health of marine ecosystems and the species it includes in the Mediterranean? To you, please.
Thank you very much, Dania, to the nice introduction, and obviously thank you very much to the organizer to have me and my colleagues and friend Tommy here to share with you all this fantastic experience that we have at the Med in the last years under the Plastic Buster initiative in order to try to define a common language in the Mediterranean Sea, both in terms of monitoring activity and in mitigation, but also in terms to interact with the main pillar at Mediterranean level as in terms of governance. As we know, the Mediterranean Sea is one of the 25 of spot of biodiversity worldwide, but in the same time, this high biodiversity interact with one of the areas most exposed worldwide of the problem of marine litter. So under the umbrella of the Plastic Buster initiative, with the labeling and support from Union for Mediterranean, we try to bind together the north and the south of Mediterranean Sea in a common language in terms of methodology. In order to understand the potential impact of biodiversity, we really know to understand the health status of the environment. And as you can see in this complex slide, it really was animated, but I will try to explain in a very easy way what we intend to have as a common language, as an harmonized methodological approach for the detect the presence of marine litter in the environment. And we have experienced this approach in several marine protected areas in the Mediterranean Sea, using a cumulative approach to define the presence of marine litter and the potential overlap of hotspot area of marine litter with the presence of biodiversity. In terms of methodology, we try to enforce very much to have a common language to detect the presence of macro and macro litter in the different compartments. And we achieve a very impressive data in which all the marine protected area investigate in the project have level of marine litter in the beaches with the marine litter monitoring approach several times higher than the threshold level suggests from the marine strategy. This is a very important alarm warning, because it's clear that the marine protected area that we suppose that will be the less polluted in the Mediterranean Sea are probably some of the very impacted area. It's again underline one of the most important message from UNEP map that we are in the same basin, so we have to work in the same way. Is why we have developed this new approach to monitor the impact of marine litter and biodiversity, focusing obviously on the common bioindicator species, the caretta, but implementing with other 46 potential indicator species as reported in the slide, in which we have applied new techniques, not only binding to the detection only of the presence of marine litter in the ingested species, but even to detect the presence of contaminants and the potential toxicological effect. One of the main goals was focusing on endangered species, such as starting from reptiles, such as caretta, to marine mammals and cetaceans, that can play an essential role in the equilibrium of the Mediterranean biodiversity, but even represent a charismatic species to involve in terms of awareness rising. The final goal at the end is identify a kind of biodiversity risk map in relation to the overlapping of the hotspot of marine litter and presence of species that will be essential in terms of governance, in terms of future mitigation activity. And I think with the topic of mitigation activity, Tommy will be focused better than me on this concept.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Christina. So certainly, I mean, it's really alarming to know that, your evidence, your results are showing that marine protected area are over impacted by that, over like limits that have been set in protocols and so on. And that's really, I mean, something that pushes us all to really focus on and to try to eliminate as soon as possible. So the other part of the question was, okay, with all the developments and the knowledge you have been able to get out of all these initiatives, do we have any transferable mitigation action at hand now to manage really collectively these adverse impacts of marine litter?
Yes, I'm just saying one sentence and then I pass the floor to my colleague, Tommy, that will be touching this subject. The strategy that we have developed in the Plastic Buster NPA and that we try to transfer on the south of Mediterranean Sea and Plastic Buster Cap is moving from the diagnosis of the impact of marine litter in the environment and the bioindicator species to design specific mitigation action. So that is the complete strategy that we really think will be essential also to incorporate and to support both in terms of marine strategy framework directive, but even to support strongly the UNEP map and the IMAP indicators. And
thank you so much.
Pleasure to pass the floor to Tommy to go more in deeply on the measure action.
Thank you so much for your time. Yes, and we move then to Tommy. Good morning, Tommy. Yeah, I see you are with us, Tommy. I hope you hear us well. So, Tommy, you are a senior policy officer and a marine litter expert in the Mediterranean Information Office for Environment, Culture, and Sustainable Development. And you have been working for many years in quite some projects very closely to our dear Christina, including Interreg Mediterranean ones, to detect and understand the problem of marine litter on coastal and marine environments. So certainly your work also has contributing to the identification of feasible and effective solutions to tackle marine litter and to transform them into measures, putting solutions somehow into actions. And the question to you, after we heard already from Christina, I mean, all these adverse effects of marine litter and the complexity of the situation and the somehow presence of this across very important areas such as marine protected areas. So in addition to these impacts on biodiversity, marine litter has climate change implications as well, and vice versa. So could you elaborate a little bit more, building on your knowledge about that point?
Yes, thank you, Dania. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for the invitation to be here with you today. Indeed, I have had the honor to be working closely with Christina in the MPAs, in the Interreg Med plastic buses MPAs, but also I have been involved in the Interreg MPA Engage that focused on climate change effects on biodiversity in the Mediterranean. So basically, indeed, the topic or the threat of climate change is closely interlinked with the marine litter one. On the one hand, we heard about the increased, let's say, frequency of extreme weather phenomena, which will inevitably lead to increased inputs of litter into the marine, in the coastal and marine environment through floods, storms, runoff, making things more difficult to keep, for example, fishing gear stored safely. But also the extreme temperatures will potentially enhance the rate of breakdown of marine litter in microplastics. Another important implication is related, and actually this has been studied for quite a long time, and this is the spread of invasive alien species. Invasive alien species are one of the most important pressures to biodiversity in the Mediterranean, and it has been found that different species can be rafting on marine litter, for example, crabs or invasive corals. And the problem of plastics, for example, when it comes to that, because obviously invasive alien species can travel also through driftwood and natural materials, but this eventually will decompose, while plastics will persist for a very long time, and the potential of carrying organisms across seas and oceans and covering larger distances is much greater. Also, what we saw through the MPA Engage project is that the marine litter will kind of undermine the climate resilience of marine ecosystems, and this is why many protected areas are orienting themselves in taking marine litter measures in order to enhance the adaptive capacity of the MPAs. And another important aspect that a lot of data is gradually coming up is related to the fact that microplastics, for example, are inhibiting the photosynthesis capacity of phytoplankton, or is interfering with the carbon cycling of zooplankton. So we understand that the implications of marine litter in relation to climate change are, or vice versa, are very important. And lastly, what I wanted just to highlight, and I will stop here when it comes to this, featuring this interconnection, is the fact that the productions of plastics per se also contributes to CO2 emissions. And actually there is a very interesting report that I would like to highlight that has been published by CL that talks about the hidden costs of a plastic planet in terms of climate change. And it predicts that by 2050, the greenhouse gas emissions for plastic could reach an amount of over 50 or 60 gigatons, which is a 10% of the entire remaining carbon budget. So this is more or less the aspects that I would like to bring forward in relation to climate change and marine litter.
Thank you. So, okay, start my video.
I hope I made it on time,
Yes,
Dania,
thank you
and
so
I didn't
much.
exhaust.
Yes, no, but I had to open the video and it took more time. No, thank you so much. And it's really important to show that, we have these cumulative effects. It's not about tackling only one pressure, such as pollution or marine litter, but it's really about these cumulative effects. And certainly all the discussions these weeks in the COP are clearly showing how much of a hotspot the Mediterranean is. If we add what you're mentioning about all these hidden costs linked to marine litter and the effects on greenhouse gases, that's really, huge. And certainly we need to massively act and urgently act against that issue. So the second part of the question is also linked to all this experience you had throughout these years in certainly understanding that the solutions towards this issue are multiple. There are many and they are varied and they depend a bit on each case. So can you somehow provide us with certain measures and tools that we have at hand that have proved to really be effective in reducing the impact of marine litter on coastal and marine environments, and how ready they are to be uptaken by regional actors?
Indeed, Dania, you're right. The thing is that wide-ranging approaches are out there and they're necessary simply because the issue of marine litter has different aspects and phases and elements. And so it requires the involvement of different stakeholders working at different levels. We had the opportunity to test and sort of validate several solutions in the context of plastic buses MPAs, working in the context of marine protected areas, which is a very kind of specific in certain ways, but also the solutions tested there are simply applicable to any other local context. So we're talking about actions on the ground. And what we saw is that, first of all, social innovations are mainly, at least to my understanding, the answer to the problem, in the sense that they are less resource intensive, okay, in comparison to technological solutions that might be resource intensive, require infrastructure and a lot of studying in order to put them forward. And these social innovations have to do with doing things differently. So preventing, for example, marine litter entering the coastal and marine environment in the first place. And to that extent, for example, we have worked with the tourism sector, which is one of the most important activities in the region, but also exerts huge pressure on the region. And we have created networks of single-use plastics-free businesses. We have tried to set up some kind of an approach on how to organize events, large-scale events, that leave a huge plastic footprint at the end of the day, how to minimize this plastic footprint of these events. We need to start from somewhere. To some people, this might seem, very specific. But obviously, on the other side, these are concrete showcases demonstrating what we can do also within different contexts. If we take the concept of public procurement and what we can do within organizations, public institutions. So these were two aspects, two measures that we tried out and really worked with tourism and recreation businesses. But also we tried to work with another important sector, and this is the fisheries and aquaculture sector. And they're obviously having a more organized approach in terms of treating derelict fishing gear that cannot be used any further, and discarding them properly, dismantling them properly, and ensuring that they are inserted in a circular economy cycle. This was one solution tested, and it seems to work really well, and it seems to be very well received by fishermen, and acts actually as a way also to raise their awareness on the broader topic of marine litter and how this impacts on their daily operations. And also through another approach of exploring alternative materials or restoring, let's say, the wisdom of the past, where things were done in a certain way. And this could be the case, for example, for mussel cultures, which mussel nets is one in particular in some areas of the Mediterranean one of the top 3 litter items found on the coastline or on the seafloor. And on the one side, to see whether alternative materials, natural materials, or even plastic materials, but that are not designed for single use, but for multi-use, could work at the end of the day. And on the other side, how the present, let's say the materials used at present, how they can be collected and how they can be treated sustainably in order to avoid their impacts. So these are 3 or 4 examples of measures that we actually implemented in 10 MPAs and replicated in another 5 MPAs. And actually currently through the Plastic Busters Cup project, we will be implementing also in Lebanon, Tunisia, Egypt and Jordan. And these are actions and measures that have been implemented in different setups and in different ways in other parts of the world, and are considered basically best practice measures. So this is more or less the experience. There are a lot of lessons learned and how to do things better, differently, how to, enrich them, and but this is more or less the concept.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you so much. And it's good really to highlight this multiple sector. So there are really ways to ensure that we work towards that direction, and they have been somehow tested, they have been transferred. And certainly, I mean, out of this first part of the session, we see that science has developed quite some steps already. We have already some solutions at hand that are tested, and it's really about now multiplicating their effects and upscaling them. Thank you so much, Tommy, for your time.
Thank you, too.
So we move now to the policy side of the question, and we have our dear Christos from UNEP-MAP. Good morning, Christos.
Good morning.
So Christos, you are a marine scientist, and you have been working for quite some years in the UNEP-MAP in support of the implementation of the regional plan on marine litter management in the Mediterranean. You have also been working quite much on the integrated monitoring and assessment program for the Mediterranean Sea and Coast, or IMAP, devised under the Barcelona Convention. So certainly from your many years of work in bridging somehow the science and policy and the convention for the Barcelona Convention. So from one side, IMAP, so this integrated monitoring and assessment program of the Mediterranean Sea and Coast and related assessment criteria, it is for the Mediterranean countries a legally binding tool to report periodically to. And we know that you have advanced in the IMAP info system, that many countries are feeding this regional knowledge base with data, including information from projects, as I understood from you, for UNEP-MAP to use somehow for the Mediterranean-wide assessment purposes. So how, from UNEP-MAP and through the IMAP, you are tackling the biodiversity indicators linked to marine litter monitoring and assessment? Can you tell us, please, for a few minutes, how are you doing so?
Thank you, Dania, for the question. You will allow me just to thank MBPC, the Interreg-Med, and the the Union for Mediterranean Universities for the invitation. I'm very, very pleased to be with you, and I hope that we will have a very nice and interesting discussion. Now, to respond to your question, indeed, since 2016, the Mediterranean countries, under the coordination of UNEP-MAP, have taken a very brave decision to adopt a region-wide regional monitoring program for the Mediterranean Sea coast, the so-called IMAP, in which there are 2 common and 1 candidate indicator on marine litter. Whereas in most of the cases, we are in a position to report abundance of on marine litter, for example, on beaches, on seafloor, or floating, etc. Biodiversity and the species that they get affected by marine litter is maybe the only or one of the very few elements of marine litter in which we can showcase the real impact of marine litter. This is very, very important. This, under the UNEP-MAP Barcelona Convention framework, is structured under the IMAP candidate indicator 24. This is the effect of marine litter on the biota. And the UNEP has taken a sequential action to approach and to tackle this aspect. We have prepared the region-wide report on the most suitable species. Then we shortlisted 10 species that could be used for this indicator. Among them, we're dealing with birds, cetaceans, marine turtles, nectobenthic fishes, demersal species, pelagic fishes, mollusks, crustaceans, and other invertebrates. And through priority action, we identified that marine litter, and particular ingestion and tacklement, is the priority for the Mediterranean to move forward in developing and in advancing this indicator. Then we also worked in the available GIS data on region-wide methodologies which are now in place and adopted within the UNEP framework. We have also a regional monitoring strategy to implement, to support the implementation and the development of national monitoring programs. And now we're at the phase where we're very happy to report that we have national monitoring programs in place. For example, Libya and Tunisia are doing greatly on this. They have nationally endorsed national monitoring programs for IMAP candidate indicator 24. This includes, of course, the engagement of national of research communities, sea turtle rescue centers, and we are now also in the position of generating data that will feed the IMAP. So there is a very coordinated action. Marine litter is the first priority, and of course there are other species that could come into the picture, but our approach is first to set the scene for this indicator, to prepare a consolidated approach towards addressing and documenting the effect and the impact of marine litter on the marine biodiversity. And our the prominent speakers that speak earlier, Christina and Tommy, they explained very nicely what is the importance of the marine biodiversity for the Mediterranean and how important it is to protect it and to retain a healthy ecosystem for them and as well as for the Mediterranean citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Christos. Thank you for that. Sorry, my camera is stopped by the organizers. Yeah, okay, that's my camera again. Thank you so much, Christos, for all these explanations. Sorry, and it's really good to know that countries are committing more, and there are already some results at national level that are in place. Sorry for that. So in addition to the national efforts, I think we have been collaborating very closely sorry, through projects as well to ensure that project results are somehow also an uptake for the IMAP info system. Can you tell us a bit more about this experience and how you are somehow envisioning further strengthening this collaboration with regional project results for more effective policy uptake, please?
Absolutely, and thanks, Tanya, for this very nice question. As it happens for all indicators, and you can imagine that also for this indicator, which focuses on the effect of marine biodiversity, no data can be missed from this exercise. So the point that you are tackling and the question that you are addressing to me is very, very important. It is, as we are dealing for a new indicator, we are dealing for an indicator which includes quite new methodologies which are not regional wide, or that methodologies that not all national teams are really into it. So we still have a lot of, to undertake a lot of effort to streamline all these aspects into the national perspectives. The presence and the data generated by the projects are of great importance. And I will tell you a very specific and very tangible example. How we can see whether the measures that we're addressing are yielding results, we can only check it, we can only assess it through the observations that we're having at sea through the monitoring. And the tools that we use are the so-called assessment criteria. In 2016, UNEP has established baseline values for this indicator, and now we're moving a step forward with updating the baseline values as well as by establishing threshold values, which will give us a hint and will guide us a bit on the so-called GES approach, so towards the health ecosystems. In this process, the data that they are generated by several projects, including the one of the MBPC, are extremely important. And we are now in the process with regional projects, with big projects that have been working, that they had the Mediterranean as an area of focus, like the Plastic Busters, like the NDC 1 and 2, and projects like the MBPC are projects in which we are reaching out when we are trying to get access to the data that they generate in order to support a very thorough analysis in the preparation of this kind of assessment criteria and the baseline and threshold values. And as we are dealing with this, these require a very thorough statistical exercise, and as you know, also from the scientific point of view, as the more data, the merrier the approach, the merrier the result is. So we really focus, and we really hope that we can reach out to you and to all projects dealing with the aspects, and to support this common goal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christos. And yes, certainly it makes lots of sense to build on already available information and to find a way to really make use of all these somehow regional efforts to tackle this issue. So more than happy to contribute also in the future to that.
It will be a pleasure.
Thank you so much. And then we will move. We're running a little bit late, so I need to move quickly to Magali. Good morning, Magali. Very happy to have you with us.
Good morning.
So Magali Uters, you hold a Master in Industrial Ecology and postgraduate degree in International Development. And you have a significant expertise in sustainable consumption and production and circular economy in the Mediterranean region. And you're currently coordinating the policy area of MedWaves. So certainly through MedWaves, or at what MedWaves, you have been working for years already, through also the work program with UNEP-MAP, so also closely with our colleague Christos that we just had now, and also through regional projects. You have been engaged in quite some Interreg Med and other projects on finding ways for reducing and preventing the use of plastics, in increasing its durability, or the durability of the plastic material, and working closely with all the Mediterranean countries to ensure an effective uptake of these solutions. So from that experience, I would like you to tell us a bit further about reduction and prevention approaches to tackle marine litter issue that are working effectively for countries. I mean, out of your experience, certainly few things are working better. What is really effectively working, building on your experience, and whether there is an uptake of these solutions, whether this uptake has been easy somehow, or whether there are still remaining bottlenecks that we need to consider.
Thank you very much, Dania. And I will try to tackle some aspects, because there is very limited time for such a very interesting question. So at MedWaves, indeed, as you mentioned, we are a center of the UNEP Mediterranean Action Plan, with a mandate on the sustainable consumption and production. So we really implement the recommendation 1 that you mentioned earlier on really tackling the unsustainable patterns of production and consumption in order to prevent marine litter generation. Now we really need to have upstream measure to address the issue. With the experience we have in working intensively with countries in the region and with policymakers, first of all, I want to say that there is no single solution. So there are many solutions that can be implemented at the policy level to tackle marine litter. And in particular, we focus a lot on single-use plastics. So it can go with a very soft measure on the information campaign. Then we can go to also issue of eco-label, also public-private agreements. Extended producer responsibility schemes are very, very important. And then we can go to consumption levies and then ban. But sometimes, ban might not be the only solution. We can go to other aspects. Regulating the issue of plastics and preventing it is very difficult. It's about always finding a good balance, whether you want to push and have increased the percentage of recycled plastics, or you want to have more reusable products. It's about finding balance, no? And we need to really have good data to see the impact, no? Or whether we want to reduce packaging, but maybe we might increase food waste. So this is very, very difficult. So we need to have also a science-based information to take decision. And also what is very important, we have seen, is that we need to have a very good knowledge at the national and local level about the production, consumption of single-use plastics. So whether they are imported, whether they are exported, whether they are produced and consumed in the countries, because this is an information that seems to be basic, but we don't have it for many countries. It's very difficult. And we need this to assess now the socioeconomic impact of policy measures that we will take. Other aspect that we just mentioned briefly, of course, stakeholder engagement is very important. If we have measures that will have impact on the industry, we'll need to involve them, no, since the beginning, so that they will be in for the implementation. Also involving citizens, no, informing them about the decision are also of utmost importance. I think it was mentioned by Somi also, we need to have a clear idea about the alternatives. What are the alternatives if we want to ban single-use plastic bags? What are the alternatives? And it's not only about material replacement, it's about changing the systems and the way we live and behave, no? So maybe we need to push more for reusable, still plastic, but reusable instead of changing material. So we need to be very careful on that. And in the region, we need also to consider highly the informal sector. That has a very important part in managing plastic waste. So they need to be part also of the solution to ensure a just transition, no, to a circular economy for plastics. So I will stop here for the moment.
Thank you so much. Certainly it would require more time, but it's good to know that among the challenges, and even though we still have quite some challenges, there are also some developments such as banning, which I think is an important instrument, but it's not easy as you mentioned. But certainly, I mean, it has lots to do on starting to really reduce the input to the system. Very well. We're running late, but I want still to have a word from you on this very, I think, important point that's linked to this hidden side. We mentioned this hidden side linked to plastics and all the chemicals they contain and their effects on biota. So what do we know about that at this stage? Certainly because you from Medwaves, you have been doing quite some work to address this issue in the Mediterranean region. Just a word on that, please.
Okay, I will be very fast. The issue of chemicals in plastic is a very, very big issue. It's now invisible. It's the invisible part of the plastic pollution. But when we started some years ago to work on it, there were some articles saying, okay, there are hundreds of substances associated to the production of plastic. So it's not about only the polymers. We have information, but about all the chemicals that are added to give specific properties to the plastic. Right now, the latest scientific articles, they listed 13,000 substances linked to the production of plastic. Not all of them are hazardous, but 1/4 are substance of concern, and there is absolutely a very huge lack of transparency about that. Countries do not have information about the composition of certain products, the chemicals that are added. So this is an issue that, well, we need really to take decision also at the global level, I think, in order to regulate this issue, because this is really affecting the environment and human health. So this is invisible, but we need to take action on that. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Magali, for that. Yes, I think it's an important topic, and it's good at least to highlight the importance of this issue and to raise a bit the awareness that there are still lots of things that we need still to know much more about, and as pressures, but also as implications on health. Very well, so thank you so much. We will move quickly to the practice side of the session, and I'm very happy to have our colleague Oriol Barba from MedCities with us. So Oriol Hello, you are an economist and political scientist with quite some years of experience in international projects related to urban development in the Mediterranean, especially linked to city planning, climate change, and local development. And you are currently the director of MedCities, this network of, if I'm not wrong, 67 Mediterranean municipalities from all over the shores of the Mediterranean. And through MedCities, you have been really key in supporting exchanges of knowledge, enhancement of capacities of the member cities to provide somehow sustainable services. This includes, I think, long experience in addressing the waste management issues, including somehow the marine litter that is somehow the central topic of this session. So I would like to know a bit more from you on how is MedCities, or how is it supporting its members on improving waste management on the one hand, the prevention side, but also including the topic of marine litter.
Thank you very much, Dania. And it's nice to be part of this panel, and I'd like to say hi also to the different colleagues that are participating today, either presentially or online. And also, just to tell you that I'm kind of speaking on behalf of the Secretary General, the Josep Canals, that was supposed to participate in the panel. So, but anyway, it is my pleasure to be with us, with you today. Yes, I think on the second part of my presentation, we will speak more about concrete examples. So I would like to use this first question to speak more on the general approach, the way we support our members on three different aspects. The first one is the question of capacity building that, as you know, it is interesting and sensitive. And I think that through the work of networks, some municipalities then can get access to some knowledge that maybe during their daily activities they are not familiar with. So I think that one of the functions of the networks is to introduce innovative topics on the daily management, and to get municipalities closer to innovative approach that maybe in some cases they are so overwhelmed by daily issues that they are not that familiar to. So bringing the agendas inside the municipalities is one of the relevant actions that I think that we do and that our members profit from. The second one, staying still on the governance side, is the question to access to funding and access to management of those funds. I think that here, and maybe because also my background is more on the management side, I think one of the most tricky aspects for local authorities in order to implement change is the question of managing those funds. I don't think it's about not being familiar with the agendas or not being familiar with the topics themselves, but more on the capacities to act, to change those situations that want to be improved. No? And this might sound a bit boring, but quite often municipalities, they have huge problems to implement existing programs, no, that are precisely designed for local authorities to benefit from. And when it comes to introducing the budgets into their municipal budget or enter into tenders following the rules of that program, or coordinating the different parts of the municipality and with other administrations in order to implement that project. Some municipalities are not that familiar with this way of working internationally. And this acts as a barrier de facto, that in most cases they are de facto excluded to profit from the programs, the existing programs, and to implement the projects that are designed to respond to those challenges. So in my opinion, we need to look at the details, because the devil is on the details, as we normally say. And it's not enough to have these programs, to have these debates on the topic themselves, because as far as we know, more or less, most of the municipalities are familiar with the topics, and they have a pretty decent and thorough agenda of change. However, the capacity to implement that agenda is not that clear. And sometimes this comes because of managerial barriers, no? And I think we need to put more the focus on that. And we can maybe in the second question enter in some details on what barriers we're talking about. But really the capacity of local authorities to implement projects in this domain is very limited. And what we try in MedCity is to support them and to give them clues in order to overcome these difficulties. And finally, on this first question, on what you were talking, the question of prevention and also waste management. Well, these are two things that are very interlinked, no? And also because in some countries in the region, the competencies of local authorities are limited. The question of waste management is still crucial, no? Because it's embedded into the actual nature of local authorities and local power mission. So the question of waste is very interlinked to what citizens also perceive as the role of local authorities. And here there's a lot of room for improvement, because the question of waste management, which at the end has a lot of impact into marine litter, especially in coastal cities, it is a matter where big room of improvement can be done, and where it actually has a direct impact on the structure of the municipality itself. So in MedCities, even if afterwards I would explain some concrete actions that we're doing on the field of prevention.
As we are, sorry to cut you, as we are running out of time, and I'm advised from the organizers to really cut it very short, can you tell us about one experience that you think has worked quite well, very shortly, at least we don't skip this important point from you?
Yeah, well, for example, since we are in the InterRegMed environment nowadays, we've been implementing some pilot actions under this program to reduce the use of simple single-use plastic on the field of sustainable tourism, for example, in the field of retails and in the field of fisheries also. So I think that things that exist in most and some Mediterranean cities, and that can be easily transferable. I think that it is important that the actions we focus on, like those two, were very simple actions linked to the daily use of citizens and the daily use of retail stores, and focusing on that very low level of simplicity and close to the daily life of citizens are the best actions that can be easily transferred to one city or another. Maybe another day we have more time, we can enter into more detail, but yeah, let's leave it there for the time being.
Thank you a lot, Oriol. Yeah, so, sorry to cut you short, but that's a little bit the limitation of this session. So I would like to thank you a lot. Certainly you have done quite much in the context of several projects. Certainly we will have the time to speak about that also in the context of other events that we will have together hopefully soon. But certainly thank you a lot for highlighting that. I am asked to already close the session, but I want still to give 1 minute to our colleague Ali Badruddin from the MPA of Tir Coast Reserve. And Ali has been with us, and I just want you in 1 minute, please, Ali, to tell us a bit about, at the site level, what have been these major environmental cumulative pressures that you have had in Lebanon on the eastern side of the Mediterranean, just to give a highlight of the importance of not only the marine litter, but also the other issues that you are suffering from in the eastern side of the Mediterranean, also linked to climate change. Please, in 1 minute time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dania, thank you for give me this opportunity to talk, and thank for the colleague. In fact, despite the 0.04% of the no-take zone in the Mediterranean, yes, we are under a mix of natural and human pressures, especially including climate change and what is associated of sea warming. And especially here, it's important to tackle the problem of non-indigenous species that we have, and it changed a lot on the indigenous one and the ecosystem in general. Also including the marine litter And here, to go fast, it's important to say that some indicators, some monitoring are also supported by the INITIBC MED project that help us to take action, monitor, and understand more the impact of marine litter, especially on marine species. And also, it enhances the link between MPA and municipality, because we need to take some decision. And a case in Lebanon, so we create, it's important, we create a tool that help us to clean the sandy beach from a side, and from other side to, let's say, sort the sandy for the plastic. So it helps us to do some creation and to apply a lot of stuff. Yeah. So thank you again for
Thank you, Ali. Yeah, sorry to keep you short, but we are really at the point of finalizing the session. But thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. I will Thank you. I will move really quickly to our colleague Alessandra Sensi. Sorry, Alessandra, we took a bit more time from your side. So you are from the Union for the Mediterranean, the head of sector of environment and blue economy. Can you please tell us, you have been certainly very busy in organizing all of this great, I think, pavilion and all these discussions. I would like you to please give you the floor to conclude this session by telling us a bit more about Union for the Mediterranean past efforts and your outlooks to really keep working on this science policy nexus around this important topic of marine litter. Thank you.
Many thanks, Dania. Many thanks to everybody. Indeed, it's a race against time, but let me wrap up actually on what was said today and the main messages that we as Union for the Mediterranean want to carry out. Of course, I mean, all what has been presented today is part of a systemic effort that the region is doing, indeed, to concentrate and maximize and pool resources, both in terms of human, technical, and financial resources around this alarming issue of marine litter. Of course, I mean, as you could hear from all the speakers, projects do feed this common agenda and project, and we are at a stage where, let's say, a lot of the practices and findings that have been made available and disposal of everybody can indeed be upscaled and capitalized on. I'd like also mention that the initial efforts that were done focusing on marine protected areas actually are valid beyond marine protected areas. Policy paper was produced. Dania, you mentioned yours. There are others indeed complementing and backed indeed by scientific fundings, indeed to enable this science policy nexus to advance. Of course, I mentioned this is part of a collaborative effort. We have here UNEMAP, the mission Restore Our Oceans, WestMed, the West, and many others. And again, they are all part of this big community that has not just a track record of advancement on this matter, but a very strong programming for the future, at least for the coming 7-10 years. Now, of course, I mean, marine litter has to be linked to plastic and waste management. It was already raised in terms of issue. Marine litter is, of course, part of this land-sea interface. Is, of course, an environmental issue, but also very strongly an economic one. The level of the UFM is part of two important dossiers on environment and climate change, as well as sustainable blue economy. Last year, we had two important ministerial declarations, which are, let's say, backed by strong roadmaps for implementation. And last but not least is, of course, our main purpose is to bring together the region. So the initial efforts that were done at North Mediterranean level are now expanded and, let's say, indeed amplified, upscaled to the countries of the south. As you know, Place Bastard was part of this community, indeed was strongly supported by the UFM, again linking with others. We have a very short video which in a certain way showcases better than anything else what was done. If you can play it for 1 minute while we are closing the session. Thank you very much, colleagues, for having been with us today, and thank you very much, Dania, for your moderation. Thank you.
Thank you all. It was great to have you all. Thank you.
you.